For decades, fans thought they knew the tragedy, but the truth behind Roy Orbison's story cuts even deeper. The voice that made the world cry carried secrets darker than anyone imagined. Behind the sunglasses and soaring ballads was a chain of heartbreak that refused to end. Now the mystery is finally untangled, and it's far worse than we ever thought. On June 6, 1966, Roy Orbison's life was shattered by a sudden tragedy that would haunt him for decades. His first wife, Claudette Frady Orbison, was killed in a motorcycle accident near Bristol, Tennessee, while the couple were riding together. Roy was ahead on his own motorcycle when a truck unexpectedly pulled out into the road. Claudette, riding behind him, had no time to react. The collision was devastating, and she died instantly at just 24 years old. Claudette was far more than Orbison's wife. She was his emotional anchor during the early rise of his career. The two had a famously complicated love story, marked by intense devotion, separation, and reconciliation. They first married in 1957, divorced amid the pressures of fame, and remarried in 1965 after realizing they could not live without each other. Only a year later, that second chance at happiness was brutally cut short. At the time of Claudette's death, Roy Orbison's career was entering a difficult phase. Musical tastes were shifting rapidly in the mid-1960s, with British rock bands dominating the charts and Orbison's operatic, emotionally raw style falling out of commercial favor. Already under professional strain, he was suddenly plunged into overwhelming personal grief. Friends later recalled that Orbison was nearly inconsolable, retreating into silence and solitude as he tried to process the shock. The loss left him alone with 3 young sons and an unbearable sense of guilt and helplessness. Orbison rarely spoke publicly about the accident, but the pain found its way into his music. His performances grew darker and more anguished, his voice carrying a depth of sorrow that audiences could feel even if they did not know its source. Songs about loneliness, heartbreak, and longing took on new meaning, shaped by real and irreversible loss. Then, on September 15, 1968, Roy Orbison suffered a tragedy so devastating it nearly broke him beyond repair. Just over 2 years after losing his wife Claudette, Orbison was touring in the United Kingdom when a fire erupted at his family home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. By the time the flames were extinguished, the house was completely destroyed, and 2 of his 3 young sons were dead. Roy Dwayne Orbison Jr., just 10 years old, and Anthony King Orbison, only 6, perished in the blaze. The boys were trapped inside as the fire spread rapidly through the home. Orbison's youngest son, Wesley, survived only because Roy's parents were present and managed to pull him to safety. Their quick actions saved 1 life, but nothing could undo the horror of losing 2 children in a single, sudden catastrophe. The timing of the tragedy made it even more cruel. Orbison was thousands of miles away, performing night after night, unaware that his family was in danger. When word reached him overseas, the shock was overwhelming. Friends later recalled that he was completely shattered, struggling to comprehend how so much loss could strike one person in such a short span of time. In just 2 years, Orbison had lost his wife and 2 sons, the emotional core of his life. The fire marked a turning point from which Orbison would never fully recover. Already a private and introspective man, he withdrew even further from public life. His grief was profound and largely silent, carried inward rather than spoken aloud. He rarely discussed the fire in interviews, but its impact was unmistakable. His music grew heavier, more haunted, infused with themes of fate, loneliness, and unbearable sorrow. In the months following the devastating house fire that claimed the lives of his sons Roy Jr. and Anthony, Roy Orbison retreated almost completely from public view. The weight of grief was crushing. Having lost his wife in 1966 and 2 children in 1968, Orbison was emotionally hollowed out, struggling to function in a world that had taken nearly everything he loved. Friends and collaborators later recalled that he became quieter than ever, withdrawn, and deeply introspective, carrying his sorrow inward rather than expressing it openly. During this period of isolation, Orbison turned to music not as a commercial pursuit, but as a form of survival. In 1969, he entered the studio to record an album unlike anything he had made before. Gone was the grand, operatic sweep that had once defined his chart-topping hits. In its place were raw, subdued performances filled with loneliness, regret, and emotional exhaustion. The sessions were marked by vulnerability. Orbison sang as a grieving father rather than a pop icon, allowing his pain to shape every note and lyric. The resulting album captured an intensely personal moment in his life, reflecting themes of loss, emptiness, and emotional disconnection. However, despite its artistic depth, the project was never released at the time. Contractual complications and label disputes prevented the album from reaching the public, and it was quietly shelved. For decades, the recordings remained unheard, effectively burying one of the most honest expressions of Orbison's grief. The album became known as his lost record, a hidden chapter in his creative legacy. When it was finally released in 2015 under the title One of the Lonely Ones, listeners were struck by its stark emotional clarity. The songs revealed a man in mourning, stripped of artifice, confronting unimaginable pain through music. In hindsight, the album stands as a direct artistic response to the trauma of losing his children, offering a rare glimpse into Orbison's inner world at his lowest point. In 1973, just as Roy Orbison was slowly attempting to stabilize his life after years of relentless tragedy, fate delivered yet another devastating blow. His older brother, Grady Lee Orbison, was killed in a motor vehicle accident near Henderson, Tennessee. The loss reopened wounds that had never fully healed, adding yet another name to the growing list of family members Roy had been forced to mourn within a single decade. Grady was not only Roy's brother, but one of his earliest supporters and a constant presence throughout his life. Growing up in Texas, the Orbison brothers shared a close bond, shaped by family ties and the challenges of Roy's rise to fame. While Roy's career carried him far from home, Grady remained a grounding connection to his roots, representing stability and familiarity in a life often marked by upheaval and loss. According to reports, Grady was on his way to visit Roy for Thanksgiving when the fatal accident occurred. The timing made the tragedy especially cruel. What should have been a moment of family reunion and quiet comfort, instead, became another source of grief. For Orbison, holidays had already become emotionally fraught following the deaths of his wife and children. Losing his brother under such circumstances only deepened his sense of isolation. By 1973, Orbison had endured an almost unimaginable sequence of personal catastrophes. Within 7 years, he had lost his wife, 2 sons, and now his brother. Each loss compounded the last, leaving emotional scars that never truly faded. Friends later observed that Orbison carried his grief with a kind of solemn dignity, rarely expressing it outwardly, but allowing it to settle deep within his psyche. In 1978, Roy Orbison confronted a different kind of crisis, one that threatened not his family but his own life. After years of relentless stress, emotional trauma, and a lifestyle that included heavy smoking, Orbison was diagnosed with serious coronary artery disease. The condition had progressed to a dangerous stage, leaving doctors with no choice but to recommend immediate open-heart surgery. He ultimately underwent a triple bypass procedure, a major and risky operation that forced him to face his mortality head-on. For a man who had already endured unimaginable personal loss, the health scare was deeply unsettling. Orbison was still relatively young, yet his heart was failing under the accumulated weight of years spent touring, smoking, and silently carrying grief. The surgery required a lengthy recovery and demanded a sudden halt to his professional life. Recording sessions were postponed, touring plans abandoned, and for the first time, Orbison was physically unable to push forward through pain as he had always done. The procedure marked a turning point in how Orbison viewed his life and career. Accustomed to working through exhaustion and emotional suffering, he was now forced to slow down and confront the consequences of neglecting his own well-being. The recovery period was long and isolating, but it also offered a rare moment of reflection. Friends later noted that the brush with death seemed to soften Orbison, making him more contemplative and aware of the fragility of the life he had nearly lost. Professionally, the late 1970s were already a quiet period for Orbison, but the surgery further removed him from the spotlight. Still, the health crisis did not extinguish his creative spirit. Instead, it underscored the resilience that had defined him through decades of hardship. Surviving open-heart surgery after everything else he had endured became another testament to his endurance. The 1978 heart operation stands as a pivotal chapter in Roy Orbison's life. It was a stark reminder that the cumulative toll of grief, stress, and lifestyle choices had reached his physical core. Yet, by surviving it, Orbison gained a renewed appreciation for life, one that would later fuel his remarkable artistic revival in the final years before his death. In the final days of his life, Roy Orbison stood at the edge of a remarkable comeback, one that felt almost miraculous after decades of personal loss and professional struggle. By late 1988, he was enjoying renewed acclaim through his work with the supergroup, the Traveling Wilburys, alongside George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne. At the same time, his solo career was gaining fresh momentum, with new material reintroducing his timeless voice to a new generation of listeners. On December 4, 1988, Orbison took the stage for what would unknowingly become his final live performance. The concert was held in Highland Heights, Ohio, just outside Cleveland. Despite lingering health concerns and a history of heart problems, Orbison performed with the same emotional intensity and vocal power that had defined his career. Those in attendance later recalled that his voice was strong, soaring, and filled with feeling, proof that the magic audiences associated with Roy Orbison had never faded. The performance carried an unspoken sense of triumph. After years spent in the shadows, Orbison was once again embraced by critics, fellow musicians, and fans. Younger artists openly praised him, while longtime admirers celebrated his return to relevance. On stage, he appeared focused and deeply engaged, delivering his songs with passion and dignity, unaware that it would be the final time he would ever face a live audience. On December 6, 1988, Roy Orbison died unexpectedly from a heart attack at his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. He was just 52 years old. The news stunned the music world, not only because of his age, but because Orbison had been in the midst of one of the most remarkable revivals of his career. After years of personal tragedy and fluctuating commercial success, he had finally re-emerged as a celebrated and respected figure across generations. In the months leading up to his death, Orbison's creative life had flourished. He had become a central member of the Traveling Wilburys, the supergroup formed alongside George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne. Their collaboration brought Orbison renewed visibility and joy, reconnecting him with a sense of musical camaraderie that had been absent for years. At the same time, he was recording new solo material with Jeff Lynne, sessions that revealed a voice as powerful and emotionally resonant as ever. Those recordings would later form the backbone of Mystery Girl, the album released posthumously in 1989. The project showcased Orbison at his artistic peak, blending maturity, vulnerability, and timeless melody. Songs like You Got It introduced his music to a younger audience, proving that his talent had not diminished despite decades of hardship. Tragically, Orbison never lived to see the album's success or the widespread praise it would receive. Orbison's death was particularly cruel given his history of heart disease. A lifelong smoker, he had already undergone major heart surgery a decade earlier, making the sudden heart attack both shocking and sadly consistent with his long-standing health struggles. His passing cut short plans for future recordings, performances, and collaborations that promised to extend his late career renaissance. The loss was deeply felt by fellow musicians and fans alike. Tributes poured in, honoring not just his unmistakable voice, but the emotional honesty that defined his music. Roy Orbison's life had been marked by extraordinary sorrow, yet he transformed that pain into songs of haunting beauty and universal longing. In death, as in life, Orbison left behind more than unfinished projects. He left a legacy. His music continues to resonate across generations, standing as proof that even the deepest tragedy can give rise to enduring art. What do you think about Roy Orbison? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye!